This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com, and this is a very interesting review of August 1999 Wrestling Observer when I didn't even know this happened. And Tim the Gem says, "Was that in Japan?" No, it actually happened on a WCW house show loop. It was very anticlimactic. So let's get into the review of the Bret Hart versus Hulk Hogan. That clip was from, they did wrestle on a Nitro, which was a no contest. You see Charles Robinson there, but let's get into it. Meltzer mentions that people have been waiting for years to see Hulk Hogan against Bret Hart. At this point, it's being written in 1999. He brings up that on April 4th, 1993, after Hogan won the WWE title from Yokozuna, after Yokozuna beat Bret, the plan was originally supposed to be Hogan versus Hart at SummerSlam 94, which ultimately, at SummerSlam 93, which I don't even remember who Bret Hart wrestled at SummerSlam 93. I know SummerSlam 94 was Owen, but I have no recollection at all at SummerSlam 93. So it couldn't have been that great because it was Luger against Yoko at SummerSlam 93. I think it may have been Bret Hart against Jerry Lawler. Hogan decided to leave the WWE instead of losing to the smaller wrestler, according to Meltzer. He brings up that Hulk Hogan, during his heyday, Bret Hart was mid-card talent. And he'd rather drop the title to a guy like Yokozuna, which he did on June 13th, 1993 in Dayton, Ohio. Then WWE spent tons of money with the Lex Express angle to have Luger fight Yokozuna. And everyone remembers the big balloon drop at SummerSlam 93 for Luger's countout victory. I still don't get that. I still will never get that. The big push for Luger. And honestly, it may have worked if they'd given him the title rather than the count-out victory. I'll never understand that. But then again, Hogan ended up going to WCW. Apparently, much like WCW was always disorganized, Hart had been off. And these matches, these three matches were thrown together. There were years of bitterness, and there still are, but Meltzer's bringing up between 93 and 99, Hart and Hogan had heat because Hart was mad that Hogan wouldn't put him over. Apparently they made up after Owen Hart's death, and they were tentatively scheduled to have a babyface versus babyface match in Winston-Salem, North Carolina at Fall Brawl, which we all know never happened. Meltzer brings up they did a short match on Nitro, which was the match that I put the picture up from. And Sting interfered in the match. It was like 3.5 minutes, shit match. But Hogan looked great in it. I don't know how old Hogan was there, but he looked great as far as physically. Apparently, the Hogan versus Hart match was called into play due to Ric Flair and Randy Savage no-showing 3 house show events in San Francisco, Reno, Nevada, and Los Angeles. So they didn't fully no-show them. They gave advance notice. That's why they called Bret Hart to replace these guys. Apparently, the original main event scheduled was supposed to be Hogan and Sting teaming up to face Savage and Sid Vicious. So I believe Hogan and Sting must have been both faces, and Savage and Sid Vicious would have been the heels. Then there was going to be Goldberg against Ric Flair. That would have been interesting. I don't remember them wrestling. Flair missed the show. due to a back injury. And here's something interesting, which they never do today. He didn't want to go to the shows, even though WCW implemented a policy where wrestlers that were injured had to at least show up at the house shows, so fans didn't feel like they were cheated because there were so many no-shows. Imagine if Bray Wyatt, who hasn't wrestled in months since like the end of February, still had to appear despite whatever injury he supposedly has. Apparently, Conan and Kurt Hennig, they were both injured, and they still appeared on this house show loop due to WCW's policy, but Ric Flair didn't. Apparently, the situation with Savage, and I'm just telling the backstory onto why these Hogan Hart matches happened, and it's very bizarre why these Hogan and Hart matches happened. Savage threw a backstage fit at the WCW office after the Road Wild pay-per-view, claiming that Hulk Hogan was trying to sabotage his career, and he no-showed the August 16th, 1999 Nitro. Meltzer mentions a few fans actually noticed that Savage no-showed the Nitro. His heat was that Hogan dropped a Humvee angle and wanted to wrestle Sid Vicious instead of Randy Savage. And he mentions they've had a love-hate relationship going back 15 years. And before Hogan died, Savage put out a rap saying he wanted to fight Hogan. So this feud continued. So Savage refused to work the weekend house shows, although at one point, Zane Bresloff, the long-standing WCW house show promoter, did have communication with him. However, he ultimately didn't decide to do the shows. So with two of the top stars no-showing, Savage and Flair, they decided to just replace it with Hulk Hogan against Bret Hart, but not advertise at all Hulk Hogan against Bret Hart. And Goldberg would face Ming, man that I have faced a couple of times, Haku. Apparently, Bischoff called Hart, who again had been sitting at home getting paid, not doing anything, and told him, according to this report, that he was going to come back and substitute for Savage on the 3 weekend shows, facing Hogan in singles matches. There was absolutely no advance publicity for these matches, which, again, in theory, it would have drawn more for the house shows. And yes, you can change radio ads. You can throw out newspaper ads. You can do things to let people know a match like that is happening. None of the 3 cities had strong advances either way. And it's interesting because Hogan didn't work a lot of house shows, so it's interesting that he was doing this. But apparently, WCW was already on its way down at this point. Bischoff was still in charge. Apparently, this was uncommon for WCW to work so hard to give a more attractive main event than the main event that was actually advertised due to all the internal problems WCW was having. Again, this is 2 years before WCW went out of business. It was always plagued with internal problems. But I guess usually with no shows, they would just not show up. And I understand that, like, false advertising and people advertise not showing up was one of the big factors in fans turning on WCW eventually. Meltzer brings up when WCW was riding high and selling out its house shows, which wasn't too long before this, these problems were taking place, and WCW never put in any effort to bring in substitutions, and it eventually caught up on them. Now they're debuting a dream match at house shows with absolutely no publicity, and the house shows didn't even have good advances. So you're adding a dream match to shows that don't have good crowds, and then you're not even telling anybody about it. So it started off in San Francisco, and the total crowd there, including comps, was 5,605 in the Cow Palace. Dave Meltzer was at this show. He said very few people in the audience had any idea there was a change to the card. There was an announcement made early in the show about Flair and Savage not being there. Hart came out in street clothes, got a huge pop because virtually nobody knew he was going to be there. He said he was having trouble making up his mind, but had flown in with his gear and challenged Hogan to a match later in the show, which got a huge reaction. Later on the show, David Penzer, the ring announcer, my old pal, who I have a shoot interview with on this channel, said that Hulk Hogan had accepted the dream match and it would take place in the main event. Then Hogan came out and said nobody deserved the title shot more in wrestling than Hart, who was and Hogan was offering him a shot at the belt, which Hart accepted. I guess Hogan was champion at this time. Both wrestlers got face reactions, although Hogan's reaction was far stronger than Hart's. Whichever wrestler was selling during the match was who the fans would be cheering. But the reaction when Hogan was selling was far stronger than when Hart was selling. Hart didn't play the crowd at all during the match while Hogan did, although Hogan got a huge reaction coming out in his red and yellow. Still, there is no way to examine a crowd of 5,700 in a building like the Cow Palace in a city like San Francisco for Hulk Hogan, Sting, Goldberg, Sid Vicious, Savage, and Flair supposedly booked on the show. So yeah, even when Meltzer's bringing up here, they're in the Cow Palace in San Francisco, a major town, and this shows that WCW was a sinking ship by this point. They had Hogan, Sting, Goldberg, Sid Vicious, Savage, and Flair all booked on this show, and only 5,700 in the Cow Palace, which holds at least 15 to 20,000. And keep in mind, AEW draws 3,000 to 4,000, so all these massive names, and that's a pretty terrible crowd for TV tapings, though, not house shows for AEW. Anyways, Meltzer goes on to say the match was 80s style mat wrestling. Hart looked in good shape, but it looked like his body was breaking down a bit and he was being careful. Hogan's knee looked like it was bothering him. Evidently, Hogan made his Superman comeback, got a big reaction, hit the boot to the face, but missed the leg drop. Hart then applied the sharpshooter, which got a big pop. The people really believed the title was going to change. And apparently it was weird because this would be the spot where fans would turn to look back on who's going to interfere, but nobody's head turned. Hogan broke the hold. Hogan broke the sharpshooter. And then, of course, Sid Vicious and Rick Steiner came out at 10:17, and the crowd groaned at the no contest. Goldberg, Sting, the Wyndhams, and Bobby Duncum followed with Goldberg spearing everyone in the end. Apparently, the biggest pop was when Goldberg ran in and speared everyone. The fans went crazy for Goldberg cleaning house. At the end, it was Goldberg, Sting, Hogan, and Hart in the ring together. It seemed that Goldberg and Hogan got the biggest reactions at this point, and Hart almost disappeared. Apparently, pretty much the same match happened in Reno, Nevada, August 21st, for 5,754 fans. And then on the 22nd, they had 10,460 fans in LA. However, only 6,818 were paid. So they papered almost 3,000 for LA, but it was basically the same match. Hart was booked for the Nitro in Las Vegas. but apparently he wasn't used on TV, and there's no definite plans for him going in WCW going forward. And Meltzer's guessing sometime in September he'll return. Apparently, the morale in WCW is really bad at this time, and this is around the time Meltzer brings up Bischoff called a meeting with the wrestlers and had a big power play. This was in Las Vegas just after these shows, where he began signaling out various wrestlers, saying he was going to turn things around. And this is beyond the Hart thing, but I'll just get into this because I'm sure you guys will find this interesting, because we've all heard about this famous speech of Eric Bischoff's. His first target was Raven, who he yelled at for making publicly. Can you imagine if Tony Khan did this? Held a meeting and like berated everybody? That would be funny. He yelled at Raven in front of everybody for going on the Man Cow radio show and talking negatively about the company. He offered Raven a release, and Raven took it. He walked out of the meeting. He then targeted Conan, who he yelled at for going over on the public address system in Reno, I guess without permission. And then what the hell? He then went on to say, quote, "You guys look like you haven't had any pussy since pussy had you." Oh, I guess Conan said that on the PA. And of course, I mean, that is over the line. I agree with that. You shouldn't be saying that for a major wrestling company. Bischoff asked Conan how can a parent in the audience explain the word pussy to a 6-year-old, and Conan apologized in front of everybody. Bischoff then went after Rey Mysterio Jr. Because he made a comment for Lenny Lane saying he was about to go down the Hershey Highway. Of course, Lenny Lane had a homosexual gimmick, and of course, comment like making fun of someone for being allegedly gay, especially 20 years later. I mean, that would have been a massive deal today, but I can't really blame Bischoff for those two things. He then yelled at Marcus Bagwell for his crybaby behavior that led to a fight with Ernest Miller before the show insurgent. And I have to say, I cannot stand Marcus Bagwell. I mean, there was incidents in WCW where he attacked workers, like people carrying the ring and stuff. Total piece of crap, in my opinion. I like DDP. I'm never going to interview Bagwell again. I'll knock on wood to that, but Bagwell has backed out of 2 interviews I was supposed to do with him. But I honestly give up on that. As much as I like DDP, I will not support Buff Bagwell. He's been a piece of crap all of his life. And God bless DDP for trying to help these guys. I would have loved to have seen, they should have just let Ernest Miller go at Buff Bagwell. That would have been funny. Apparently, Bischoff then yelled at Public Enemy because they complained about doing a squash to Sid for the Thunder tapings. Public Enemy apparently gave their notice right after being asked to put Sid over. Apparently, they also had a problem with putting Goldberg over in a handicap match. So the match was changed a few weeks later to Rocco Rock versus Goldberg in the singles. And then, of course, they went to WWE and got the crap beaten out of them by the APA. And were never heard from again since. And I'm pretty sure they're both dead now. Anyways, this goes on. I guess I'll go on about this. Bischoff then said, if anyone has the balls, they can get out of their contract right now. Ric Flair, who had been trying without success to get out of his contract, was not there. as the night went on, Raven, Conan, Billy Kidman asked Bischoff for a release, and there were calls made to Terry Taylor in the WWE and Paul Heyman. Raven was the only one interested in going to WCW. Anyways, I'm not going to go into that any deeper. We do know that Raven did go back to ECW and eventually went back to WWE, but crazy times in wrestling back then. I guess nothing much changes. It was Doink that he wrestled in 1993. I think Bret did wrestle Doink. I don't think Hogan ever wrestled Doink. Shout out to Benjamin. Doak Turner was the ring announcer for NWA in West Virginia in the mid-'80s. Almost every card changed the night of the event, so change always happens. It's funny that people will crucify independent shows if there's a change, but I did security for 12 years at the arena where WWE is tonight here in Ottawa. Thank God. I'm really grateful YouTube is my job now. I don't have to do security anymore. But there was, every time WWE came, there was always an announcement at the start, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so isn't here. You have till the end of the first match to get a refund. And nobody ever complained. But obviously WCW got really bad because there was big names not showing up. Tom says, I don't think Hogan did any house shows in WCW except 2 runs with Flair in the summer of 94, the spring of 99. Well, apparently in August of 99, around this time back in 1999, he had 3 matches with Bret Hart. Yeah, Bagwell, there's an interview with him on here with me where he's right out of it. He was back in jail last month. He's as bad as Sonny, but I am glad that DDP is trying to turn him around before he ends up like Sonny. I'll say that, but I wish DDP well with that endeavor. I've done DDP yoga. I've got out of the hospital like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago now, 2.5, 3 weeks ago. I've done DDP yoga every day but 2 days when the doctors told me not to do DDP yoga because I had a blood clot, and they told me until the blood clot medication kicks in, don't do anything that could disengage the blood clot. And I have a lot of respect for DDP, but Bagwell, I mean, I'm sure he would suck up to the people above him, but it seems to me like the people below him that he could treat like shit, he would treat like shit. Anyways, that was pretty interesting stuff. I found that interesting. Have a good night.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any